Well, good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 152 of the Prancing Pony podcast, where we write Gandalf was here as graffiti at the campsite on Caradhras.
And in signs that all can read from Rivendell to the mouths of Anduin. Folks, go ahead and pull up a bench in the common room, and we'll be right there. I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the Man of the West, who thinks fire might just be a good idea, Alan Sisto.
That's only because I didn't get to drink the Miravor, Sean. The flask was empty when it got to me.
Don't look at me. I don't know anything about that. But my belly is warm, and I feel a new strength of heart. So I think I'm ready to brave these mountains, even if I have to bear you on my back.
And you will.
Gladly. And speaking of the mountains, that's an excellent, well, it's, I guess, at least an attempt, at least, at segueing into today's, it's not a very good attempt, it's just an attempt. I'll just call it a mediocre attempt at segueing into today's Tolkien quote of the day.
It's a not quite utter failure at segueing into today's. How's that? Does that work better?
There you go. It's an E for effort.
There you go.
Well, as often happens when I prepare this segment, I'm feeling kind of indecisive about this one. So I'm going to pick a couple of quotes to talk about from the same letter. Now, the letter I'm looking at today is letter number 306. This was actually written by Tolkien to his son Michael in two parts, apparently. The first part was written in August 1967, and then it seems like he put it aside and maybe forgot about it and picked it up again later in October 1968. Now, we talked early this season about Tolkien's 1911 trip to the alpine village of Lauterbrunnen in Switzerland, and how that village was an inspiration for Rivendell. Well, it seems like his Swiss hiking trip in the Alps also inspired the Misty Mountains themselves.
And since the mountains are about to get nastier than ever for the Fellowship, it seems this is a good time to bring in some quotes from the letter.
I thought the same thing. Now, Tolkien actually said to his son that his alpine hiking trip was an inspiration for the trip of Bilbo and the dwarves across the mountains in Chapter 4 of The Hobbit. But it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to find some strong similarities between that part of The Hobbit and this part of Lord of the Rings. You know, you get a lot of the same features. You've got the wind, you've got the cold. Yeah. In both cases, you've got these flying rocks that are apparently hurled by supernatural beings. And of course, we've got murderous precipitation. I think it was rain in The Hobbit, and here it's snow.
Murderous precipitation. I love it. Yeah.
Yep. So here we are talking about it now.
Right.
Tolkien, in this letter, relayed to his son a really cool story at length about his own real-life fellowship's trek up the mountains and down into a valley. Talked about how they used to spend the nights sleeping in barns and sleeping in sleeping bags on the floors of a chalet inn, playing games and just kind of roughing it, well, at least roughing it by my standards, which admittedly, it's kind of a low bar. He even explains how the nearby mountain Silberhorn, which is German for Silverhorn, was the Silvertine Celebdil of my dreams.
Oh, yeah.
But then we get a really delightful story about a trip up the Alich Glacier, and I really want Alan to read this.
No pressure then, right? All right, here we go.
You got it.
One day we went on a long march with guides up the Alich Glacier when I came near to perishing. We had guides, but either the effects of the hot summer were beyond their experience, or they did not much care, or we were late in starting. Anyway, at noon we were strung out in file along a narrow track, with a snow slope on the right going up to the horizon, and on the left a plunge down into a ravine. The summer of that year had melted away much snow, and stones and boulders were exposed that, I suppose, were normally covered. The heat of the day continued the melting, and we were alarmed to see many of them starting to roll down the slope at gathering speed, anything from the size of oranges to large footballs, and a few much larger. They were whizzing across our path and plunging into the ravine. Hard pounding, ladies and gentlemen. They started slowly and then usually held a straight line of descent, but the path was rough, and one had also to keep an eye on one's feet. I remember the member of the party just in front of me, an elderly schoolmistress, gave a sudden squeak and jumped forward as a large lump of rock shot between us, about a foot at most before my unmanly knees.
So now you know why I gave you that passage, Alan. I knew if one of us was going to have to say the words, my unmanly knees, I wanted it to be you.
And you wanted to record that for posterity, too.
Totally. Yeah. I'm going to take that clip, and I'm going to use it. I don't know where, but somewhere.
Well, it could be the interesting answer to a number of questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's also the bit in there about the hard pounding, ladies and gentlemen. I had to look that one up, actually, because Tolkien put hard pounding in quotes.
No
in the
smirking
letter.
allowed, people. No smirking allowed.
Oh, come on. A little smirking is allowed.
All right.
Especially when you think about me Googling hard pounding to find out what Tolkien was talking about.
Dude, I'm glad you Googled that, not me.
Well, because Tolkien puts it in quotes, and I'm like, why is this in quotes? So I bravely Googled it, and I found out it's actually a reference to a comment made by the Duke of Wellington about the Battle of Waterloo. He actually said, hard pounding this, gentleman, and he went on a little bit longer. But yeah, that's what Tolkien's talking about there. So that's why he puts it in quotation marks. So now you know. I Googled it, so you don't have to.
That's right.
But I love this letter. I love the bit that you read there, and you can absolutely hear the similarity to Bilbo's adventure up the mountainside. There's even just a snarkiness to the way the story is told that reminds me a bit of Bilbo and the narration of The Hobbit. But it also reminds us a little bit about the passage we're going to be reading today, you know, when stones began to fall from the mountainside.
Right.
We'll see a lot of that here. And I just love, again, so often with Tolkien's quotes and with Tolkien's letters, it's just the way he words things. There's so many great little narrative flourishes here. I love I came near to perishing, little exaggeration.
Hopefully that's hyperbolic, right? Yeah, I hope it is, yeah.
Yeah, I came near to perishing. We get likening the boulders to large footballs, which just puts me instantly in mind of Thorin saying he's afraid of becoming we'll be kicked for a football. You know, he doesn't
by the giants, the stone giants.
Yeah. You get the squeak of the schoolmistress, which just brings the story to vivid life.
Yeah.
And of course, my unmanly knees.
Yeah. He was afraid. Who wouldn't be?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's it. Yeah. I'm thinking like he's actually physically saying his knees are unmanly, but you're thinking like his knees are just like shaking, right?
Right. He's terrified by, this rock shooting in front of him.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't be? Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It's a great touch. And it's that sort of self-deprecating nature of the "my unmanly knees" comment that made me decide to include the second quote from this letter.
Okay.
So the story about the Alpine hike comes from the first part of the letter. That's the part that was written earlier in August 1967. But near the end of the letter, in the section dating to October 1968, Tolkien said something else that was also very self-deprecating. He said, now remember, this is 1968. This is after he retired.
Yeah.
And it says, I have only since I retired learned that I was a successful professor. I had no idea that my lectures had such an effect. And if I had, they might have been better. My friends among Dons, and he also put friends in quotation marks.
Yeah.
My friends among Dons were chiefly pleased to tell me that I spoke too fast and might have been interesting if I could be heard.
Ouch.
I know, right?
I've been told that.
Have you been told that you might be interesting in any
Very
circumstances?
rarely have I been told that, but I have been told I speak too fast. That's true.
Have you? I've definitely been told that, yeah.
Yeah, and too much.
Oh, yeah.
Quite clear.
I don't get that one as much.
Not anymore, yeah. So isn't it interesting? He didn't realize until really late in his life that he'd been a successful professor.
Yeah.
But, we've talked to others, Michael Drought and Corey Olsen both come to mind, John Garth to some extent, about Tolkien's success as an academic, aside from his success as a writer. Was he truly just blissfully unaware of all this?
Right. Yeah. Did he not realize like the effect he had on like Beowulf
every
studies,
student who ever, right?
Yeah, that too. Yeah. Or just like, the long lasting effect he had on just, Anglo-Saxon studies, Beowulf studies.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Even if he had never written a word of fiction, he would have been successful in that regard. Absolutely.
I mean, I know academic writing is dry, but it's hard to imagine something like Beowulf or On Fairy Stories being better, right? His lectures were phenomenal. You got to remember that those works that I just mentioned started life as lectures.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, On Fairy Stories, especially. I mean, that's a beautiful piece of writing,
Absolutely.
piece of lecturing. Yeah.
Yeah, doubt about that. He spoke too fast. We already know that. We've heard some of his recordings even here on the show, and he does speak very quickly. But might have been interesting. I'd like to think he knows better than that. Yeah.
I hope so. Yeah. And maybe that's why he put, my friends in quotation marks, my so-called friends among the other Dons. Right. They always told me I spoke too fast and I might otherwise have been interesting. Maybe he knows better on that part. But
maybe.
Yeah.
Well,
I
good stuff.
wonder, now that I'm thinking about it, is he just saying, maybe I only just realized that I was a successful professor because people around me kept on telling me I wasn't, because he kept on being criticized by his colleagues.
By his colleagues, that's a good point.
I don't know.
Well, that was a really great quote of the day, Sean. Thank you so much for bringing that in. But now let's go ahead and get back to the book, because we're all about the books here at the Prancing Pony Podcast.
We absolutely are, although we do bring you other Tolkien stuff from time to time. At heart, Alan and I are really fans of Tolkien's books and books about Tolkien. That's what we love.
Mm-hmm. And as you know, we read a lot of books in preparation for this show every week. Now, if you'd like to get your hands on a book that we've mentioned, you're going to want to check out the official library page of our website, theprancingponypodcast.com, where we have links to just about every book we've ever mentioned on the show.
And there's a lot of other great stuff on our website, too. There's show notes and book links specific to each episode. There's outtakes. There's Prancing Pony Ponderings. And there's a few other little extras up there. You'll also find a link to our new online storefront at teespring.com/stores/PPP, where you can find shirts, mugs, stickers, and a lot of other great Prancing Pony Podcast gear. And we've got new stuff coming out soon. So please check that out.
Absolutely. And now, let's get ready to run away.
All right. Run away!
Bravely brave Sir Robin. Anyway.
Yep.
So let's go ahead and jump in exactly where we left off the last time, and I'm going to go ahead and read here.
Okay.
While they were halted, the wind died down, and the snow slackened until it almost ceased. They tramped on again. But they had not gone more than a furlong when the storm returned with fresh fury. The wind whistled, and the snow became a blinding blizzard. Soon even Boromir found it hard to keep going. The hobbits, bent nearly double, toiled along behind the taller folk, but it was plain that they could not go much further if the snow continued. Frodo's feet felt like lead. Pippin was dragging behind. Even Gimli, as stout as any dwarf could be, was grumbling as he trudged. The company halted suddenly, as if they had come to an agreement without any words being spoken. They heard eerie noises in the darkness round them. It may have been only a trick of the wind in the cracks and gullies of the rocky wall, but the sounds were those of shrill cries and wild howls of laughter. Stones began to fall from the mountainside, whistling over their heads or crashing on the path beside them. Every now and again they heard a dull rumble as a great boulder rolled down from hidden heights above. "We cannot go further tonight," said Boromir. "Let those call it the wind who will. There are fell voices on the air, and these stones are aimed at us." "I do call it the wind," said Aragorn, "but that does not make what you say untrue. There are many evil and unfriendly things in the world that have little love for those that go on two legs, and yet are not in league with Sauron, but have purposes of their own. Some have been in this world longer than he." That's interesting. I mean, maybe he's talking about the sort of incarnate version of Sauron. Sauron was a Maya, so nobody's been in the world longer than he.
That's a good point, yeah.
So I'm not sure exactly to what he's referring.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, maybe Ungoliant might be, but she's certainly not anybody that's currently an evil and unfriendly thing. She's only currently a dead thing. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I mean, I guess my first thought is, something like the Balrog, but they're both Maiar, and they both presumably came into the world at the same time. So, yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting one. Maybe what Aragorn's getting at is some have been in the world longer than Sauron has been evil.
Oh, maybe that's true.
Then you could see something like the Balrog being evil first. At least I always kind of thought that the Balrogs were some of the first Maiar to fall.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Then again, Aragorn could just not be right. I mean,
that's true too.
It's possible,
That is true too. So let's go back to the beginning of the passage. We see the wind and snow dying down for a bit, but interestingly, only while they're stopped. And
this is really fascinating, and we're going to see this throughout the rest of this chapter. How
we will.
The snow and the wind really are a response to them. It's when they stop, when they turn back, they die down, but when they go up again. When they start making the crossing again, it gets worse. And that tells you that this really is a response to their presence here.
Oh, yeah.
Makes it very clear.
To their assault on the mountain, as you might say. Yeah.
Yeah. Fresh fury. Once they go on again, it comes back with fresh fury.
And when they do stop, what do they notice? the sounds, and the
Oh,
stones.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
man.
Shrill cries and wild howls of
Mm,
laughter.
mm. And stones, including boulders being, rolled and dropped from heights above.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Boromir's point is that this isn't the wind. This is something or someone doing this to us. And Aragorn's like, well, it is the wind, but that doesn't change the fact that we're its targets. It's an interesting insight.
That's a really interesting insight. Aragorn does call it the wind. He's not going to say, oh, it's this creature, it's, this particular kind of mountain giant, or it's Sauron, or it's whatever. He's not going to say it's anything particular. It's the wind, but it doesn't change the fact that we're its targets and that it is doing this to us. And he specifically says that there are evil things in the world that are not in league with Sauron. Think about something like Old Man Willow. We talked about that. When we get to this a little bit later, we'll probably talk about, the same question with the Watcher in the Water, or even the Balrog. Are these evil things truly in league with Sauron, or are they just acting independently?
Absolutely. Very important.
And this is an important reminder from Aragorn.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
It still doesn't tell us what it is.
No.
He calls it the wind, but what? I don't know.
What is it really? Yeah. I don't know. It reminds me a little bit of that passage in The Hobbit, though, when they went over the mountains. And here's a quote from that. The wind came shrill among the rocks. Boulders, too, at times, came galloping down the mountainsides. The echoes were uncanny, and the silence seemed to dislike being broken.
A
lot of similarities there.
Yeah, there definitely is. Yeah, like we were talking about in the earlier segment, there's a lot of similarities between that moment in The Hobbit and this moment. And yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's just this idea that there is this presence here in the mountains. Mm-hmm. And Gimli seems to kind of be thinking of this when he talks about Caradhras' epithet, doesn't he?
Right after the section we read. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he'd mentioned earlier when he was talking about all the mountains and their names in various languages, he called it Cruel Caradhras. And here he says it again. Caradhras was called the Cruel.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be implying that Caradhras has some sort of agency. It has emotions.
Yeah.
So,
and
again,
perhaps the ability
to
act on those. Yeah.
Is there a mountain spirit here that's malevolent? Is it some emanation of Sauron? Is it some part of Sauron? Or is it something older? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we'll be wondering that throughout this chapter as we finish it up.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're
certainly not going to get a clear answer.
Certainly not.
No.
But I like Gandalf and Pippin, because they kind of step back off this question of like, well, what is this thing?
Yeah.
Right?
So, yeah, and then Pippin, of course, being very practical. His whole thing is just practicality. What can we do? Doesn't matter whether who's throwing the rocks. It doesn't matter if Caradhras is cruel or whatever. What are the practical steps that we're going to take?
He just wants to do something. He's miserable. He just wants it to change. Yeah.
Yeah. Very quickly, he's shivering. He's exceedingly cold at this point. And they really can't go forward. I mean, Gandalf's like, look, we either stop where we are or we turn around. Those are the only options. We can't keep going. Because if we do keep going, we're going to get into a place where there's absolutely no shelter from this. Nothing.
There's even less shelter behind. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And of course, Sam has to give his 2 cents to that.
I love that little line.
So-called shelter.
One wall and no roof make a house.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Sam, there's a lot of moments in this chapter where Sam just kind of like, I think I said this last week. Sam just kind of complains to nobody in particular.
Yeah. This is one of those moments. I mean, he's muttering it, so he's not intending anybody to listen.
Exactly.
The narrator hears. Narrator hears everything.
Yeah.
So, well, I'm going to go ahead and have you take the next reading. We're going to skip over to the great sleepiness that comes over Frodo, which frankly, I'm feeling that right now. So
me too, man. Me too. All right. A great sleepiness came over Frodo. He felt himself sinking fast into a warm and hazy dream. He thought a fire was heating his toes, and out of the shadows on the other side of the hearth, he heard Bilbo's voice speaking. "I don't think much of your diary," he said. "Snowstorms on January the 12th? There was no need to come back to report that." "But I wanted rest and sleep, Bilbo," Frodo answered with an effort, when he felt himself shaken. And he came back painfully to wakefulness. Boromir had lifted him off the ground out of a nest of snow. "This will be the death of the halflings, Gandalf," said Boromir. "It is useless to sit here until the snow goes over our heads. We must do something to save ourselves." "Give them this," said Gandalf. searching in his pack and drawing out a leathern flask. "Just a mouthful each, for all of us. It is very precious. It is Miravor, the cordial of Imladris. Elrond gave it to me at our parting. Pass it round." As soon as Frodo had swallowed a little of the warm and fragrant liquor, he felt a new strength of heart, and the heavy drowsiness left his limbs. The others also revived and found fresh hope and vigor.
99 flasks of Miravor on the wall, 99 flasks of Miravor. You take one down, you pass it around, 98 flasks of
Miravor on the wall.
Oh, man. All right. Sorry about that for the most part. Let's take a look
You're
at some of the
sorry.
details.
You're not terribly sorry.
Well, yeah, for the most part, no.
Yeah.
Interestingly, in the passage, the part of the passage we didn't read, we see now that it doesn't matter that they've stopped. The snow is coming down.
Mm-hmm.
Now the mountain is just trying to kill them. It's no longer trying to get them to stop.
Mm-hmm.
It's now trying to end their lives. The storm just keeps on coming. And it's enough now that the hobbits would have been buried had they been by themselves. That's a ton of snow. We're talking about 4 feet of snow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's also excellent evidence of Elrond's good foresight in sending big people with the hobbits. I mean, not that he would have sent the hobbits on their own anyway, but
no.
Man, isn't it good that there are some nice tall people around here?
It's a good thing he sent a couple of men, because I think the elves would just run over the snow.
Well, and we'll see specifically what men were able to do later on. Yeah.
That is correct. No doubt about that. So let's take a look here at Frodo's symptoms. He feels himself sinking into this dream. He feels the sensation of heat at his toes.
Mm-hmm.
He's having a hard time when he's shaken, coming back painfully to wakefulness. Anything that you can think of? I mean, this doesn't appear to be hypothermia. It doesn't appear to be shock. So I don't know. It's just a dream then. Maybe it's just a dream.
I don't know that this is a physical ailment so much as it is a spiritual one. I think it's really a lack of hope that he's suffering here. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it's coming from. I don't know whether it's coming from an outside force or whether it's coming from within himself. Or
right.
I don't think there's a reason to believe the ring is doing this. I suppose there's an outside chance, but I don't really think there's any evidence of that. I just think it's a lack of hope. I don't think he's quite despairing, but I think he's moving towards that way. He wants to give up. He wants to go back. And
I agree.
And I think it's interesting then that the Miravor is not only like a physical tonic, but it's also a spiritual one. It's gonna,
absolutely.
It's going to reinvigorate his soul as well as his body.
Mm-hmm. Boromir comes in here, and he is, as typical, we'll see, very concerned with the practical.
Also
we must
very practical.
Do
You're
something.
right. Yeah.
He is. We're going to see this theme repeated throughout the whole chapter. He's the whole chapter. This last 25% of the chapter.
Right. Yeah.
He's a very practical person here, and his whole point to Gandalf is like, look, there's no point in just sitting here until we are buried in the snow. We've got to do something. So I'm sure at this point he's thinking fire and death are our two choices, so we should break out the wood. But Gandalf still doesn't do that. Instead, he breaks out something else.
Still got one more trick up my sleeve. Let's try this first before we do the fire. Yeah,
absolutely. Miravor.
Now, do you think he would have done it without Boromir prompting him?
That's a really good question. I'd like to think he would. I'd like to think he'd say, you know what, folks?
We're at this point.
A little bit of Miravor. But Gandalf, he likes his Miravor. I can see him sort of kind of, stealthy drinking it when nobody's looking at him.
He's keeping it close, like his 25-year-old bottle of scotch that he doesn't want to bring out for anybody.
Exactly. Well, I don't know. As long as Gandalf's been around, it's probably a lot older than that.
Probably. You're right.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, you might think, oh, well, he's Gandalf, he's a Maya, but remember, he's an incarnate.
Right.
So
he can die.
He suffers.
Or his body can die,
his body is just as vulnerable as ours is. So he's feeling this. He's feeling the
absolutely.
cold.
Every second of it, yeah.
He could be killed by the cold just as much as anybody else. So it's not like, oh, the wizard doesn't get how bad this is for the poor mortals. He's in the same boat as them. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you'd like to think that he would do this. He would recognize the importance of it. But I don't know. But Miravor, good stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. Sounds like I might even want some.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll have to get you some.
Well, who's not going to want a little bit of fresh hope and vigor and
absolutely
being revived and all of that, new strength of heart?
Yeah. Interesting thing about that
If
strength
you
of
have
heart.
vigor lasting for more than 4 hours, immediately contact your doctor.
Oh, well done, sir. Well done.
Anyway.
Speaking of that, I know we've got some stuff on the some word nerdery on Miravor, but I want
Oh, yeah.
I want to, since you brought up strength of heart, I was thinking about something here. The fact that it's called a cordial, the cordial
Yeah.
of Imladris.
Yeah.
These days the word cordial just means a liqueur, like any kind of sweet alcoholic beverage. But the
Right.
word cordial actually is related to the Latin word for heart, cor.
Right.
And the reason that cordials are called cordials is because they were originally alcoholic beverages that were thought to stimulate the heart. So I think Tolkien
Mm-hmm.
might be playing on that etymology a little bit when
Maybe.
he calls it a cordial and he says it gives them a strength of heart. So I don't know. I
That
just
wouldn't
thought about that
surprise
when
me.
you just now said that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. The other meaning of cordial, of course, is that when people are cordial to one another, they're kind to one another.
They're friendly,
respectful
yeah.
to one
Mhm.
another. They're friendly.
Mhm.
And that's got to be, a heart thing too, I would imagine. I
That's
don't
true.
know.
Yeah,
Maybe
absolutely.
that's a reach. Maybe it's not. But
I don't think it is. I think he might be
no,
playing on all these things. There's
quite possibly.
there's fellowship here between these guys.
Mhm.
They are
Yeah, there is.
they're coming closer together in community. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But now, where did this word come from? Well, we're going to take a look first at The Road Goes Ever On, the songbook that Tolkien wrote with Donald Swann.
Mhm.
In that, he describes a cordial of the Valar called Miravore, very close, Miruvore, which seems to be the clear predecessor to Miravor. He says that, according to the Eldar, it is a word derived from the language of the Valar, the name that they gave to the drink poured out at their festivals. Its making and the meaning of its name were not known for certain, but the Eldar believed it to be made from the honey of the undying flowers in the gardens of Yavanna, though it was clear and translucent.
Right. So that's the in-universe explanation for the name, and also because it's made from the honey of flowers in Yavanna's gardens. Obviously, it's a kind of mead.
True.
I think in previous episodes, I think we had some questions about whether it actually was a mead or something else, but that makes it pretty clear that it's a mead. Going back to the word itself, though, in Parma Eldalamberon, issue number 12, Tolkien's manuscript that's published in that issue makes it really even clearer that this is the case by explaining the real-world linguistic inspiration for Miravor. Tolkien writes, its invention goes back to at least 1915, its real source being Gothic midu, which equates to Germanic medhu, which means mead, plus wothes, meaning sweet.
Wow.
Then supposed to have been developed so. So he combines these two roots into a single Germanic word, midhuwodi, which then became midhuwodi, which then became mirowodi, which then became miruvore.
Which would then become Miravor. Yeah.
Right.
Better you than me, Sean, by the way, on all that, on that Gothic. Wow. Man, just typing that made my head hurt. Yeah.
It's just saying it is a little challenging.
Yeah.
But actually, I could talk about this stuff all day because, believe it or not, the Germanic word medhu.
You can.
I can try. But that Germanic word medhu, meaning mead, is actually one of my favorite words because it actually comes from a Proto-Indo-European root that means honey and sweet drink, but it also gave rise to words for honey, for sweetness, and also for like wine and alcoholic beverages in a whole bunch of different European languages. So, if you're not only a word nerd, but you're also a beverage nerd like me, and you'd like to learn more about that, shoot me an email. I'd be happy to go into it in a little more detail privately. It's I could go on way too long for this episode, but
well, also better you than me then, Sean.
Yeah,
I'm not up for that.
Yep, I figured.
All right. Well, now that it's as bad as it is, Boromir makes his point.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to fire? Asked Boromir suddenly. The choice seems near now between fire and death, Gandalf. Doubtless we shall be hidden from all unfriendly eyes when the snow has covered us, but that will not help us. I love that snark, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
You may make a fire if you can, answered Gandalf. If there are any watchers that can endure this storm, then they can see us, fire or no. But though they had brought wood and kindlings by the advice of Boromir, it passed the skill of elf or even dwarf to strike a flame that would hold amid the swirling wind or catch in the wet fuel. At last, reluctantly, Gandalf himself took a hand. Picking up a faggot, he held it aloft for a moment, and then with a word of command, Naur en edraith ammen, He thrust the end of his staff into the midst of it. At once a great spout of green and blue flame sprang out, and the wood flared and sputtered. "If there are any to see, then I at least am revealed to them," he said. "I have written Gandalf is here, in signs that all can read from Rivendell to the mouths of Anduin." Yeah.
Yeah.
Rent the billboard, get the searchlights going,
Yeah.
So interesting that Gandalf here, until the very end, seemed to be reluctant to use his Magia. Was this maybe a matter of secrecy, like he didn't want to be, for it to be known that he was with them? Or is this maybe another purpose? Could this be something like...
Is this a Valar told me not to use my power kind of thing? So
Right.
I'm really not going to use it unless I absolutely have to.
Yeah,
Could be. I mean, because this is, again, the choice is between fire and death. And right now it's death if he doesn't do anything. So
that's true.
If he has been forbidden to use his power by the Valar, now would be the time to do it, because the quest is going to fail if he doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
There could be something there.
Yeah.
Or it could just be that he just doesn't want to be known, It would certainly send a clear signal if you've got Sauron.
He's a very private man. He's very concerned with his privacy.
I just can't use my Magia in front of all these people,
Somebody's going to ask for the last four of my social. I can't,
Yeah. We've only been together for a few weeks. I just don't really know that I feel that comfortable around him just yet. I'm not really myself yet.
No.
But no, I don't know. I think it could be a little of both, really. I mean, it's definitely, he has to do it. If he doesn't do it now, the quest is over. They can't light the fire otherwise. So he's going to have to do something. It would be, I mean, you maybe could argue that he would be negligent in his duties if he allowed the quest to fail just because he didn't want to use his Magia.
I think so.
I mean,
I can see him now, Well, you incompetent lot can't start a fire. I suppose you deserve to die. I mean, really.
Can you imagine him freezing to death and then going back to like Manwë and Varda and having to explain to them why he didn't use his Magia?
Yeah.
Like,
and why, right, exactly.
But you said don't use my power, but you let him die, Olorin. Yeah, but you told me not to use my power, guys, but you let him die, Olorin.
Yeah, we kind of figured you'd use your judgment. It was a general, it was more of a guideline than an actual rule.
How did I know you were going to go with that one? Oh, that's great. That's awesome.
You saw it coming, but just
I totally saw it coming right before it happened. Like, but yeah, it's like totally like he knows he's got the good judgment to know this is when I really need to use that power.
This is the time to do it.
Yeah.
I want to point out that now that we have this candle, I should say, this fire, this
candle
pile
in the
of
wind,
wood and kindling. Oh, this kindling in the wind.
You live your
terrible.
life.
Okay. Am I really going to let you sing that?
No, I'm not going to sing any further.
Oh, come on. You got to at least get to the kindling in the wind line if you're going to do it.
Like a kindling in the wind.
I may edit that. So what I want to point out is this little tiny fire is a literal circle of light from Beowulf, isn't it?
Ooh, yeah, it sure is.
Yeah. I mean, this is all about the darkness and the light. And now it's not represented in good people versus a horde of orcs or anything like that. This is a literal circle of light. I mean, granted, they don't have the mead hall, but they just had mead, and now they have light and fire.
Oh, good point. Yeah. That's a good point. Yep.
Yeah.
And here they are in a little circle around the flames. Behind them, the night was like a black wall. Man, that is an image straight out of the Beowulf essay.
That is Beowulf right there.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And when you say it like that, you start to think about that element of inevitable defeat.
Yeah, which we'll see.
We're going to see that at the end of this chapter. Relevant. Yeah.
Yes, we will.
They're going to stave off the cold and the wind, but we're going to see, spoilers, folks, they're going to be defeated by it.
Yes, they will.
This is just a brief moment of relief from it. That's a good catch, man. I like that.
Thank you, sir. I do what I can every now and then.
Yeah. I want to point out, while we've got a little bit of cinder and word nerdery to get into here.
Yes.
Treason of Isengard tells us that this is Sindarin for fire be for saving of us. So we get a sense of how Gandalf's Magia works. It's a very literal, it's called a word of command here. It is a very literal command, really, like to the element of fire, Fire be for saving of us.
Absolutely. Kind of awkward. It sounds like a really bad translation. Fire be for the saving of us.
Yeah, I know. If it hadn't been for Christopher wording it that way, I probably would have found a different way to word it. But I think he's just trying to be literal.
Oh, I'm sure he is. Yeah.
So,
well, let's see. So the fire burns low, and the dawn is coming pretty close, and the snow is growing less, and that's where I'm going to have you pick up.
Okay. Frodo gazed wearily at the flakes still falling out of the dark to be revealed white for a moment in the light of the dying fire. But for a long time he could see no sign of their slackening. Then suddenly, as sleep was beginning to creep over him again, he was aware that the wind had indeed fallen, and the flakes were becoming larger and fewer. Very slowly a dim light began to grow. At last the snow stopped altogether. As the light grew stronger, it showed a silent, shrouded world. Below their refuge were white humps and domes and shapeless deeps beneath which the path that they had trodden was altogether lost. But the heights above were hidden in great clouds still heavy with the threat of snow. Gimli looked up and shook his head.
Caradhras has not forgiven us, he said. He has more snow yet to fling at us if we go on. The sooner we go back and down, the better.
To this all agreed, but their retreat was now difficult. It might well prove impossible. Only a few paces from the ashes of their fire, the snow lay many feet deep, higher than the heads of the hobbits. In places it had been scooped and piled by the wind into great drifts against the cliff. "If Gandalf would go before us with a bright flame, he might melt a path for you," said Legolas. The storm had troubled him little, and he alone of the company remained still light of heart.
"If elves could fly over mountains, they might fetch the sun to save us," answered Gandalf. "But I must have something to work on. I cannot burn snow."
Sort of like Frozone can't work without water vapor, right? The air is too dry.
The air is too dry. Without water vapor, he might make ice.
This is kind of the
he might be able to do something here. Maybe he could freeze the snow into like an ice ramp or something. Slide.
Yeah, like a big slide. Yeah.
Yeah. Then again, he might just make things worse.
Yeah, quite possibly. So Gimli's the first to say the obvious. If we keep going, it's just going to get worse. We need to turn around. And we get universal agreement. There's no specific indication of Gandalf and Aragorn's assent to this, but clearly universal agreement means
universal agreement means universal agreement. So they must be putting aside their differences.
Yeah.
Maybe Aragorn has finally realized, okay, I guess I was wrong about this path. So, but how do they do it? I mean, they can't get back down there. You know, the snow is actually taller than the heads of the hobbits.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's actually where I'm going to go ahead and pick up because, Mr. Practical again has a solution. Or at least he has an idea. "Well," said Boromir, "when heads are at a loss, bodies must serve, as we say in my country. The strongest of us must seek a way. See, though all is now snow-clad, our path as we came up turned about that shoulder of rock down yonder. It was there that the snow first began to burden us. If we could reach that point, maybe it would prove easier beyond. It's no more than a furlong off, I guess." "Then let us force a path thither, you and I," said Aragorn. Aragorn was the tallest of the company, but Boromir, little less in height, was broader and heavier in build. He led the way, and Aragorn followed him. Slowly they moved off, and were soon toiling heavily. In places the snow was breast high, and often Boromir seemed to be swimming or burrowing with his great arms rather than walking. Legolas watched them for a while with a smile upon his lips, and then he turned to the others. "The strongest must seek a way, say you? But I say, let a plowman plow, but choose an otter for swimming, and for running light over grass and leaf or over snow, an elf." With that he sprang forth nimbly, and then Frodo noticed, as if for the first time, though he had long known it, that the elf had no boots, but wore only light shoes as he always did, and his feet made little imprint in the snow.
I do kind of love that moment.
Yeah.
We'll get to it in a minute. Let's go back to the beginning there.
Okay.
And Boromir. I love, there's a few times early on when the fellowship is together, you get a couple of these little proverbs. And you get one from Boromir here, don't you?
When heads are at a loss, bodies must serve.
That's a really telling Gondorian proverb. They're the kind of people that will work things out with their heads first if they can, but every once in a while You have to use your body every once in a while. You're gonna have every once in a while you're gonna have to use your strength, your physical attributes to do
Play
that.
to your strengths. Uh-huh.
And that's pretty cool. Now he says that point of rock down yonder. He says it's no more than a furlong off. How long is that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've seen the word furlong before, and I think we've covered this definition, but I want to go ahead and go over it. It's equal to 1/8 of a mile.
Okay.
So it's 220 yards. Now, it derives from the Old English words firth or furrow and long or long. It dates back to early Anglo-Saxon times, and it's the length of a furrow in an acre of plowed land, a plowed open field.
Huh,
so,
interesting.
Yeah, that was the amount of distance that a team of oxen could plow without resting.
Okay.
So once again, our non-metric measurements are all based on totally random crap. How
Right.
far can an ox go without resting? Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, we're done.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's really cool. I do remember
yeah.
us talking about how long a furlong was. I don't remember the etymology. If we talked about that before, that's really interesting.
220 yards. So it's not a very long way. 220 yards. I mean, that's if you can picture yourself on a track, like at your local college or something, your local high school. It's it's a half a lap.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, it's not a super short distance, especially given the weather, but it's certainly an achievable distance. Yeah.
Well, speaking of measurements, Hammond and Skull actually provide a little insight about the heights of Aragorn and Boromir, which is interesting here as well. Now, this comes to us courtesy of a 1969 note written by Tolkien that actually resides in the collection of Tolkien papers at the Bodleian Library in Oxford. In that note, Tolkien says that Aragorn, direct descendant of Elendil and his son Isildur, both of whom had been 7 feet tall, must nonetheless have been a very tall man with a great stride, probably at least 6'6", and Boromir, of high Númenórean lineage, not much shorter, say 6'4".
Man, we got a couple of really tall guys here.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
I got to say, if Boromir's described as broader and heavier in build at 6'4", he'd probably make a good outside linebacker, defensive end hybrid maybe for 3-4. I don't know.
Man, you're gonna like out me as like not knowing much about football. Because I mean I only know what a 3-4 is because I played some Madden. But
there you go. There you go. Yeah. Well, he's not going to be an anchor in a 4-3. He's probably a little bit too short for that. But yeah. So Aragorn's a little skinnier. Maybe he's a wide receiver. I mean 6'6", skinny, presumably fast.
Yeah.
QB though, if he's got an arm, I mean 6'6", you got to stand tall in the pocket. Anyway,
he probably does have an arm. Come on, I think Aragorn could quarterback.
Yeah, probably.
Surely.
Probably. Yeah. He's a little thin, so he can't take a lot of punishment. He's got to have a really good offensive line to protect him.
Yeah.
And Boromir's not that guy. At 6'4", he's not like these 6'6", 6'8", 350-pound offensive tackles. So. I mean, he is only described as broader and heavier in build, not massive. So.
Right. Yeah. He's not like he's not a tank.
No, he's not. Anyway.
Oh, that's great.
Total digression. Fun stuff.
A bit.
Yeah. Just a little.
A little. And again, you know this. I like football. I can't speak football.
You don't know anything about it.
So,
right. Yeah, that's true. No, it's all right. I'll forgive you.
Thank you very much. I just can't. I can't help you out much with that. So
no,
I'm going to go with your analysis.
Exactly. Good idea. Just go with what I'm saying. It's always the best way to go, right?
But I'm going to make a really bad joke and say,
okay,
this is fantasy football.
Oh, that's awful.
Isn't that terrible?
That is terrible.
Thank you very much.
That is terrible.
You can have that. You can cut it. You can leave it in. You can do whatever you want with it.
Okay.
It's awful, and it's yours. Fantasy football.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you too, Sean.
Anyway, your fantasy football draft.
Yeah.
That's arguably a better joke. This is your fantasy football draft, but
right here. Yeah.
Too late now. So, what are these men going to do since they're not being drafted for your fantasy football team?
No,
what are they going to be doing? They're going to be working hard, aren't they?
Yeah.
Swimming or burrowing through the snowdrifts.
Yeah, that's quite a bit of work, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you compare it to Legolas, who's getting a little elf-like, well, actually, he's perfectly elf-like. He starts a little light mockery, moves on to a little bit of condescension, and then some sort of pseudo-magic.
That's really, totally elf-like. Yeah.
That is. Yeah.
Yeah. Although I have to say, when he makes a reference to a plowman in a comment about people having different
Oh.
strengths, I can't help
Oh,
thinking
yeah.
of philosophers and plowmen. Each must know his part to sow a new mentality closer to the heart.
Closer to the heart. Yeah. You left me
Yeah.
hanging, man.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I thought I'd end it where it made sense to end it, but no, you had to keep going.
I had
didn't you?
to. Yeah.
You
Great
had to
stuff,
keep going.
though.
I wasn't sure if I could do the Geddy Lee. Yeah, I just didn't know.
Oh, I definitely can't do the Geddy Lee. That's in an octave that doesn't exist in my universe. So.
No, indeed.
But hey, we got to sing a little bit of. I mean, how often do we get to sing Rush on the show?
I know.
Once every couple weeks.
Right, exactly. It's been so long. It's been so
I
long
know.
since our last Rush reference.
It's been such a long time.
Oh man,
wait,
and you
Debbie
got Boston in there too. Oh,
There you go. Well,
that's
you
like
know,
a Prancing Pony podcast doubleheader right there.
There it is. There
Where's
it
the
is.
hat
One more
trick?
for the
Come on, we got to come
trifecta,
with one more.
I don't think we can.
Oh man.
Maybe as time moves on, we've got a little bit more here with the successful retreat. But before we get to that, we have a quick word from Bombas. You know, working out is hard. Truth is, it's always been hard, and I can tell you I've been trying to get back into it. It is still hard. Even when it's easy, it's hard. Now, here's the thing. Bombas socks can't change that, but they can make it more comfortable. So if your resolution is to get fit this year, start by getting socks that can keep up every step of the way.
And the reality is you do a lot of different things to stay active. So Bombas made a lot of different performance socks designed for everything from running to hiking to cycling and more.
Now, I got to say, constantly pausing your treadmill to adjust twisted, bunched-up socks, I can speak from experience, that's enough to make anybody want to quit. But Bombas socks are designed with left-right contouring and a Y-stitched heel, so honestly, they stay perfectly in place.
And here's another thing. Did you know that socks are the #1 most requested item in homeless shelters? Bombas socks were created to change that. For every pair you buy, Bombas donates a pair to someone in need.
That's right. So go to bombas.com/PPP today and get 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/PPP for 20% off. Bombas.com/PPP. Now let's get back to the retreat from Caradhras. I'm going to go ahead and have you read the next section. So if you'd pick up there, that'd be great.
All right. The others waited huddled together, watching until Boromir and Aragorn dwindled into black specks in the whiteness. At length they too passed from sight. The time dragged on. The clouds lowered, and now a few flakes of snow came curling down again. An hour, maybe, went by, though it seemed far longer, and then at last they saw Legolas coming back. At the same time, Boromir and Aragorn reappeared round the bend far behind him, and came laboring up the slope. "Well," cried Legolas as he ran up, "I have not brought the sun. She is walking in the blue fields of the south, and a little wreath of snow on this red-horn hillock troubles her not at all. But I have brought back a gleam of good hope for those who are doomed to go on feet. There is the greatest wind-drift of all just beyond the turn, and there our strong men were almost buried. They despaired until I returned and told them that the drift was little wider than a wall, and on the other side the snow suddenly grows less, while further down it is no more than a white coverlet to cool a hobbit's toes."
Ah, it is as I said,
growled Gimli.
it was no ordinary storm. It is the ill will of Caradhras. He does not love elves and dwarves, and that drift was laid to cut off our escape.
Probably true.
Wow.
So,
Once again, with Gimli pointing out that Caradhras is doing this intentionally.
a mountain with agency. Yeah.
Creepy stuff, yeah.
So this progress takes an hour for them to
Mhm.
get more than an hour. It's at least an hour and possibly more than that before they're able to come back.
Yeah,
So this is hard work.
yeah.
And it's true. I mean, if you think about it, 220 yards of snow, some of which is as deep as your head.
It's going to take a
I'm
long time to
surprised it's
clear with
longer
your
than that.
arms. Yeah,
Yeah, even if you're two strong guys.
yeah.
Legolas's news, though. Oh, the sun's just as condescending as elves. She's not going to do a dang thing.
Notice it's she. I like that little detail.
Yeah.
If you read
Well,
the
of course, we
Silmarillion,
know that,
you know
right.
why the sun is she.
Yeah.
I really like the fact that Legolas is the one to report this, that the snow doesn't go as far as you think it does.
Right.
It stops just after this point. I'm not sure I know what to make of this, although I don't know. I feel like Legolas is bringing back a little bit of Estel here. He's bringing back some hope that's founded
it's
on...
even mentioned explicitly in the passage. A gleam
I bring
of good
back hope,
yeah.
doesn't he? And it is specifically Estel hope because it's founded on something.
It is.
It's not, cosmic, theological, beyond the circles of the world Estel, but it is a microcosm of that. And I like the fact that it's the elf that's bringing it back to them because the elf is able to see farther than men. I don't know. That seems... I could be reading too much into it, but I just like the fact that it's the elf who brings that to the men.
I like it too. It fits. I mean, it certainly couldn't have been Gimli. I can't see that.
You wouldn't see Gimli being the one to do that. Yeah.
No, I just don't. But speaking of Gimli, that great observation about Caradhras.
Mm-hmm.
His insight, his knowledge of history, his understanding of this mountain specifically and its hostility towards elves and dwarves, really interesting.
Yeah.
But that's where I'm going to pick up with Boromir, who's in good spirits, huh?
Yeah, he is.
But happily your Caradhras has forgotten that you have men with you, said Boromir, who came up at that moment. And doughty men, too, if I may say it, though lesser men with spades might have served you better. Still, we have thrust a lane through the drift, and for that all here may be grateful who cannot run as light as elves. But how are we to get down there, even if you have cut through the drift? Said Pippin, voicing the thought of all the hobbits. Have hope, said Boromir. I am weary, but I still have some strength left, and Aragorn too. We will bear the little folk. The others, no doubt, will make shift to tread the path behind us. Come, Master Peregrine, I will begin with you. He lifted up the hobbit. Cling to my back, I shall need my arms, he said, and strode forward. Aragorn with Merry came behind. Pippin marveled at his strength, seeing the passage that he had already forced with no other tool than his great limbs. Even now, burdened as he was widening the track for those who followed, thrusting the snow aside as he went. They came at length to the great drift. It was flung across the mountain path like a sheer and sudden wall, and its crest, sharp as if shaped with knives, reared up more than twice the height of Boromir. But through the middle a passage had been beaten, rising and falling like a bridge. On the far side, Merry and Pippin were set down, and there they waited with Legolas for the rest of the company to arrive.
Such a great moment.
Isn't it? Love this.
It's awesome. And I have to say, Hammond and Skull have very high praise for it. They actually say, this is Boromir's finest hour.
Yeah.
Without his advice about taking wood for a fire, and his strength, the company might not have survived the night or escaped the mountain. Pippin's admiration will grow even greater when Boromir defends him and Merry from orcs, and will influence him to offer his service to Boromir's father, Denethor.
Agreed, though I might say his redemption in defending Merry and Pippin might actually be his finest hour. But I will admit this is the finest hour in which he is still alive at the conclusion of the hour.
It's the finest hour he survives. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think you're right about that. Finest hour so far, and I think it's definitely when we really learn to appreciate him as a reader, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, I agree totally. We start to see.
Oh, this guy's super cool. I like this guy.
Yeah. Well, and he's super practical. He's concerned about others. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it does kind of build on, like Hammond and Skull say, the later sacrifice builds on that and sort of shapes Pippin's opinion about him, and that really leads directly to Pippin offering his service to Denethor, like they say. So that's super cool.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Great stuff. Well, and of course, Boromir also carries Sam, not just Pippin. Aragorn had carried Merry on the first run, and he returns to carry Frodo, which, as an aside, I'll say was probably a good call.
Carrying Frodo and
having Frodo in the ring,
not letting Boromir carry Frodo.
yeah, probably your best.
Yeah,
bet
good
there.
point. Good point. Yeah.
But the camaraderie is clearly developing in the Fellowship very early on here in this chapter. There's banter, there's joking through the danger, there's trust and reliance on each other, there's condescension from the elf, and then there's carrying each other. It's all good stuff.
I don't know if condescension from the elf is good stuff, but I wouldn't call it that. I think it's elf joking, which is naturally teasing. They do tease, don't they, the elves?
Don't they? Yeah. Don't dip your beard in the foam, Father.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. But, all that stuff you're talking about the camaraderie, this makes me realize that the influence of the Great War in Tolkien's work isn't just the nasty stuff like Mordor and the Dead Marshes. I'm sure that some of the stuff we see here is based on Tolkien's experiences in war. I looked in John Garth's Tolkien and the Great War, I did find something that kind of alludes to it. It's not exactly on point here, but I did find a little passage that I thought was kind of illuminating here, and I want to read that now. It's not too long.
Okay.
It says, C.S. Lewis leaned strongly towards the view that the war of their generation had cast its shadow on his friend's story. Lewis had also served on the Western Front, discovering camaraderie in the midst of horror, suffering trench fever, and then sustaining a blighty wound at the Battle of Arras.
Yeah. So, before you go on, do you have an explanation maybe of what blighty wound means for folks?
Yeah. So a blighty wound was a slang term for a wound that one would receive in combat that was serious enough to get you sent home, but that wasn't fatal, that wasn't permanently crippling. So it was just bad enough to get you out of there, basically.
Okay. That makes sense.
So going back to Garth's quote, reviewing The Lord of the Rings in 1955, he wrote about one of the book's general excellences, its surprising realism. And now this is a quote from C.S. Lewis from Garth's book. This war has the very quality of the war my generation knew. It is all here. The endless, unintelligible movement, the sinister quiet of the front when everything is now ready, the flying civilians, the lively, vivid friendships, the background of something like despair, and the merry foreground. And I think we see a lot of that stuff here. We've got Garth's quote about C.S. Lewis discovering camaraderie in the midst of horror. And I think we definitely see that with the Fellowship here. And then in Lewis's own quote, these lively, vivid friendships. You really see these friendships forming among the members of the Fellowship. This merry foreground. There's this horrible dread that's hanging over them. There's this danger that's hanging over them. And yet there's merriment that's happening. And
yes,
you really do see that here. And I think that's all coming from Tolkien's experiences.
I agree. So what else do we have here? Well, we have the fall of stones. We have Gimli shouting at nature again. Not again yet, but he'll be doing this again when they get to Fangorn. But here he's, shouting at the mountain, we're departing as quickly as we may.
Does that help? Does shouting at nature help?
I'm not sure that it does. Just generally shouting at rocks and at trees. Yes. Gimli, you might need to see a professional about this.
Shouting at rocks, that does make it sound like he has a problem.
Crazy. Shouting at rocks,
A bit.
Yeah. Just a little, Gimli's a little different, that's all.
A little bit.
So the snow lessens, not a surprise.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm going to have you pick up and take us through the rest of the chapter.
Okay. The morning was now far advanced. From the high place they looked back westwards over the lower lands. Far away in the tumble of country that lay at the foot of the mountain was the dell from which they had started to climb the pass. Frodo's legs ached. He was chilled to the bone and hungry, and his head was dizzy as he thought of the long and painful march downhill. Black specks swam before his eyes. He rubbed them, but the black specks remained. In the distance below him, but still high above the lower foothills, dark dots were circling in the air.
"The birds again,"
said Aragorn, pointing down.
"That cannot be helped now," said Gandalf. "Whether they are good or evil, or have nothing to do with us at all, we must go down at once. Not even on the knees of Caradhras will we wait for another nightfall."
A cold wind flowed down behind them as they turned their backs on the Redhorn Gate and stumbled wearily down the slope. Caradhras had defeated them.
Wow. Well, like you said earlier, we're going to see a defeat. That circle of light, the ultimate defeat, and here we have it.
Yeah.
Man, Caradhras has defeated them.
I want to ask you, before we get to that, I want to ask you your thoughts on Frodo's dizziness here. Obviously part of the dizziness is just thinking about going downhill. Dizziness of heights, probably.
And he's freezing, and he's hungry.
Yeah. I was wondering how much you think this relates to his earlier kind of, not quite hallucination that he has, but this sort of moment of...
that weird dream?
Yeah, the weird dream we talked about. He's not in shock, really. He's not hypothermia yet. It's more of just more of a spiritual agony at that time. What do you think about this? Do you think this is that, or do you think this is just the heights getting to him?
I think it's just the heights and an interesting way to bring in the reality that the birds are still there. Because I think we all kind of understand that thing when you're super tired and you get the little black swimmers floating through your eyeballs.
And then you blink them away, and then you realize the black specks.
They're still there because it's the birds.
Because now he's actually seeing the birds. That's true.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, that's true. And I was thinking the black specks the first time were dizziness, tiredness, whatever, and then the second time they're
Right.
birds. But it could be the same both times. It could be the birds both
Could
times,
be.
really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Caradhras has defeated them. That is such a
Yeah.
blunt statement. I mean, it's true, obviously, but it's a little hard to swallow. I mean, it's a reminder that our valiant fellowship cannot defeat all foes, and that, like we've talked about before, defeat is inevitable. Another Beowulf theme.
It is absolutely another Beowulf theme. I mean, the Fellowship has been on this quest for only 14 pages now. Looking at
That's not
looking at
very
my
long.
edition of this, 14
Wow.
pages they've been on their quest, and they've already suffered a significant
Yeah.
defeat.
Very significant. Yeah.
There's nothing that they can do at this point except recognize they've been beaten and find another way.
Yeah.
That is very Beowulfian. I think it's a great
Yeah, it
call
is.
out. And
Absolutely.
I think it's really interesting that you noticed the little circle of light that they were in before. You know, we talked about that. They're going to have a temporary respite from the cold, but they are going to be defeated by it eventually. And
yeah, they will.
yeah, that's intense. And it's
Yeah, it is.
it's not what you expect from a fantasy novel,
No,
especially from
no.
a fantasy novel written by an author who supposedly writes nerdy, childish stuff that the good guys always win in, you know?
Yeah. And here they most assuredly did not. And even on the next, the alternative dark and secret way, they'll suffer some pretty serious consequences.
Yeah, they certainly will.
Hmm.
So, I mean, what do you think? The Will of Caradhras. Can we get any closer to figuring out exactly what this is? What kind of entity this is?
That's a good question. I mean, you think about maybe, I don't know, comparing it to the old forest where nature has a real character, a real animus, a real presence and will. But the problem there is those trees are identifiable as huorns or, ents that have gone bad or trees that are becoming entish. There really is no such equivalent for a mountain.
You don't expect, I mean, since mountains are not really alive, you don't expect mountains to have some sort of
have that sort of agency.
Even in a fantasy world, you don't expect them to have that kind of agency. I know.
But this certainly does seem like it's Caradhras.
It does. I mean, we talked in the previous episode about, is it Sauron? Has Sauron's arm grown long enough? And the idea that, we're not saying it is, or Gandalf is not saying it is Sauron, but it could be Sauron.
Right. It's not impossible that it is.
I still don't think it is Sauron. I still do think that this is Caradhras. I feel like,
I agree.
I feel like the fact that Aragorn doesn't think it's Sauron. Aragorn says it's the wind.
He says, "Yeah, I do call it the wind, but that doesn't make what you say any less true.
Yeah.
We're still a target."
I think that's significant. I think that does tell us that this is the mountain. But what kind of entity it is, I just don't think we can know. And I think that's just another one of those things
mystery
that adds to the depth of the world. Yeah.
Yes, it does. My goodness.
Do you think it's targeting Frodo in any way?
I don't know, because it doesn't seem, like Aragorn said earlier, not everything that's evil is in league with Sauron.
Right.
I think, we'll have a discussion about that on The Watcher in the Water, who I think did target Frodo on purpose.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because of an alliance with Sauron, but because of its intelligence, because of its awareness.
Yeah.
I don't know if a mountain could do that.
Could target Frodo. Yeah. It doesn't really seem like it is. I mean, the only thing that made me wonder is it says, hardly had Frodo touched the ground when with a deep rumble there rolled down a fall of stones and slithering snow.
Right.
But I think that's just a function of the fact that Frodo was the last one down.
Was the last one down, right.
Yeah, I don't think it's that it's actually going after Frodo.
No.
I think it's kind of like what Gimli keeps saying, is that the mountain doesn't want them there.
Right.
And it's going after them.
The mountain is saying, "You shall not pass."
Oh, well done. Nice. Very nice.
Well,
So, yeah, I think that's what's going on here. And it's a really interesting moment. It's, again, one of those moments that just adds depth to the world. And I think that I like the idea that it's not Sauron. I'm not 100% sure that it's not Sauron, but I like the idea that it's not Sauron.
Yeah, I prefer that idea as well. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
But folks, Caradhras may have defeated us as well as the Fellowship, but we're not done yet. We have Bartleman's Bag coming your way in just a minute here. And even when that's done, well, the talk continues all night long at the Prancing Pony.
That's right. We've always got lots of discussion happening in our social media spaces. At our common room on Facebook, you'll find comments, questions, corrections, and more on every episode, and also updates from us throughout the week.
Yeah.
To find us there, just look for the Prancing Pony Podcast on Facebook and click the like and follow buttons.
And now we have another common room over on Reddit. You can find a lot of great discussions there in a growing community at r/Prancing Pony Pod.
Yeah.
And as always, you can find us on Twitter and on Instagram, both with the handle @PrancingPonyPod. So follow us wherever you might be. And if you like us, please consider sharing us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, anywhere you can find Tolkien fans.
Yeah, and you said it's a growing common room on Reddit. It really is growing just beyond our wildest expectations. We have, as of recording this episode, we have 2,700 members there.
Wow.
And amazing discussions going on there all the time.
That's
and
in what,
so much,
2.5 months, something like that? Maybe not even three.
Yeah.
Certainly not 3 months. No.
And we saw it double in 1 week. We saw it go from like 1,000 to 2,000 in 1 week a few weeks ago. So
pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, it's growing really fast and a lot of great discussion happening there. And I'm loving it. I'm spending as much time as I can there. So please do check us out there. Come join us there.
Yeah.
And if you really want to let the world know how you feel about us, especially if you feel positively about us, give us a review on iTunes. The more reviews we have, the more visible our podcast is. That helps others find us and this great community of Tolkien fans we've built and are still building together.
Absolutely. And if you'd like access to exclusive content like postscripts, quarterly specials, PPP swag, and a lot more, check out patreon.com/prancingponypod to find out how you can join the fellowship of the podcast. Now, I think it's time for us to see what old Bartleman has in the mailbag for us. Sean.
Okay. Well, tonight we're going to start with an insight from longtime listener John L., and this is about something we've discussed on and off since the beginning of the season, the different tone between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. John wrote in to say, I have been frustrated by those that cannot accept the tonal differences between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, Rivendell included, since I was a teen, which is 3 decades now. So settle in for a bit of a ramble on the how and why. John says, I had a father and a stepfather. Both were Vietnam veterans with very different in-country experiences. Henceforth, father will denote he that I am the seed of, and dad will denote my stepfather, he that did the majority of my upbringing. As a teen, I found the red leather-bound 3-in-1 Lord of the Rings on my father's shelf, so that would have been his biological father, and thought it a pretty thing. My father explained it was the Red Book of Westmarch version. That made me look deeper. Then it dawned on me that Bilbo wrote There and Back Again, and translations from the Elvish, but Frodo wrote all the rest. My father, now that's his biological father, was a Navy corpsman assigned to Marine Infantry. He was in, well, folks, this is a family podcast, but I think you've probably heard the slang term for combat used by Vietnam veterans. That's what John uses here. And by the way, the rest of this is going to get kind of intense, so just buckle up here. John says his father was basically bodily riddled, scarred physically and mentally for life. My dad, that's his stepfather, was drafted after finishing his bachelor's degree in finance and was therefore assigned to a divisional-level paymaster billet in Da Nang, where he stood watch occasionally and kept the troops paid on time. They told stories about the same place, the same war, but in completely different tones. They were similarly aged, from the same neighborhood, but what they each carried from their time in Vietnam and how it shaped the persons they were was in stark contrast. Dad talked about the guys he was with and their stashing prohibited weapons just in case, and fighting the rats for space in guard watch bunkers. My father talked about jumping from Hueys that couldn't land because of the enemy fire, the sight of his lieutenant getting shot in the head whilst helping with a casualty, what it felt like to get shot, back of the neck to out the armpit, the thought that his last sensory inputs would likely be the smell of and feel of helicopter exhaust. As a teen, I realized that Bilbo wrote The Hobbit, as I said, thanks to that whole Red Book of Westmarch edition thing. He had an adventure with some stiff times, excitement, and bits of danger. Frodo wrote The Lord of the Rings. He was repeatedly wounded and spent almost the whole adventure, quote-unquote, in a state of perpetual suffering. The tones of their written experiences should be different. I looked at it as the difference between my dad's Vietnam experience and my father's Vietnam experience. Since I was a teen, it was okay that Bilbo told a story with more whimsy about the same place Frodo told a story with greater depth and heaviness. For Bilbo, his first interaction with Rivendell was as a break from campfire food. For Frodo, it was getting called back from the brink of death after repeatedly facing one of the darkest powers in the world.
Wow.
Whew.
That is heavy.
Amazing share, John. Thank you so much. I mean, I've just got chills from reading it, honestly.
Yeah, me too.
a fascinating
That's a
story.
really insightful distinction
It is a really, you're right. It is a very insightful
of these
distinction.
tonal styles. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
two people can experience the same broad thing in
Right.
such very different ways, being a different
Right.
part of it.
Right.
And that really does explain the Bilbo Frodo
Yeah.
differences really
Yeah. It
clearly.
really,
Yeah.
honestly, it illustrates it in a better, it just drives it home in a way that I've
Yes,
never really thought of. And you can absolutely
I
see
agree.
how both of these two characters, Bilbo and Frodo, they both had sort of similar experiences in the same place, but yeah, totally different. And,
Agreed.
we talk sometimes about Frodo coming back from his quest with PTSD.
Yeah.
We talk about the fact that he's scarred for life, and PTSD is a term we've used before. And, of course, I think most of us are intimately familiar with that term from, hearing about it in reference to Vietnam veterans. And I think John's story really illustrates that. And I think we can use a term like PTSD to describe Frodo, but until you hear a story like this, even though it's a secondhand story from his his dad and his father, hearing that really just brings Frodo's experience to life a little bit more and shows us how different it is. And I'm kind of stunned, and I'm also just really appreciative for John sharing that. So thank you, John.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Well, also on the topic of the different tones, our good friend Chris B., who's sent us some very moving and eloquent insights in the past, had this to say. On the tonal shift from Book 1 to Book 2, and its precursors in Book 1, I want to draw some more specific parallels between Book 1 and The Hobbit, and posit the place where the major divergence begins, which is not, as Corey Olsen says, I will tell you the tale of Tenuviel, which is his contention for when the worlds of The Hobbit and of the Legendarium were at last unified in the professor's imagination. If you look at the Book 1 adventures of the Old Forest and the Barrow Downs, you can see one major development. The first is an adventure that would have been perfectly at home in the pre-Mirkwood Hobbit, a difficulty that was life-threatening, and from which the Hobbit protagonist is rescued by a deus ex mythica figure, Gandalf in The Hobbit, Tom Bombadil in The Fellowship, with very little agency of his own. The Barrow Downs adventure ends in a superficially similar way, but I'm going to argue that it differs in one major respect, both from the Old Forest and even from the Mirkwood adventures and after of the intrepid Bilbo. The difference is Frodo's agency in taking up the barrow sword and disarming, yes, I went there, he says.
Well done, Chris.
And disarming the Barrow-wight. While their ultimate rescue is again by Tom, that rescue could not have taken place without Frodo's act of courage in defying the influence of the ring and of the spell of the Barrow-wight itself. If Frodo gives in to the temptation to don the ring, there is no Ho Tom Bombadil. This also differs from Bilbo's adventures in that, while Bilbo does display similar courage and moral fidelity, at all times he is aided by the supernatural powers of the ring, which is of course not the ring yet, but you know what I mean. In a very real sense, Frodo's act of courage divides the story of the Fellowship and Forward from The Hobbit, even before the advent of Aragorn Strider and the return of the heretofore ominous but not altogether present Black Riders. On a separate note, one place I have come to agree with Professor Olsen, Chapter 1 of Book 1 is written by Bilbo, possibly the only work he achieved on the part of the Red Book covering the adventures of Frodo, which is an in-universe explanation of the tonal difference. I find this altogether persuasive. There's more there, which we'll get into a future episode, but for now, let's talk about this.
That's interesting. So, okay, breaking down some of the things that Chris is talking about here. First of all, we've got, I guess last of all, the idea that Bilbo wrote A Long Expected Party, just Chapter 1 of Book 1. Not all of Book 1, which I feel like is an idea that I've been thinking about a lot. I think we've talked about that a little bit. The idea that maybe Bilbo wrote all of Book 1 from Frodo's recollections. I don't know. What do you think about that? Did he just write Chapter 1?
That certainly seems more feasible in terms of explaining the style differentiation.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I feel like the jury might be out for me on whether he wrote all of Book 1 or not. I still kind of think he might have written all of Book 1, but I'd like to do a little closer analysis on the styles to see that. He definitely wrote Chapter 1 because obviously that's his own story.
Right.
But I'd love to do a closer comparison of the styles to see, at what point does Bilbo's pen stop and does Frodo's pen take over? I don't know. That's really interesting.
That is an interesting
I love
question.
the idea that Frodo's victory under the Barrow is the place where his story finally becomes unified with the larger legendarium. That's
I do
really
too, because
cool.
that's one of my favorite moments in all of Book One. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not just unified in terms of the story, he's talking about Corey Olson's idea that it's, I will tell you the tale of Tenuviel, which obviously is when the
Right.
stories become connected. But
Mm-hmm.
Frodo's victory under the Barrow is really a connection thematically with the legendarium.
Yeah, it
and
is.
I really like
Yeah.
that. That's super
I
cool.
agree.
And I really like that insight from Chris.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I mean, when would it be? I think the arrival of Aragorn arguably maybe too late. I mean, I guess that's another place where the story intrudes because you've got Aragorn stepping out of Numenor and stepping out of this long history, descendant of Eärendil and things like that.
Right.
Song of Beren and Luthien, I think, again, that's probably a little bit too late. I really like the idea that the first place where the story becomes part of the legendarium is this moment where Frodo has this great victory. And I think, we, as readers, we feel the importance and the weight of that scene. And I think Chris has hit upon a good reason why that scene feels so important to us. It really is kind of a turning point for the story. I like it.
I like that too.
Super cool. Shame that it gets cut out of every single movie and
I know
movie adaptation.
I know every adaptation. I know.
Yeah,
it is a bit of a shame, but that's simply the way adaptations go.
Yeah, just what it is. But thank you so much, Chris and John, for your insights today. Really great stuff. Great food for thought. Not questions so much today, but just fun stuff to think about.
Absolutely. Well, folks, that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Now, please be sure to join us again next week when we go to the Warg Petting Zoo in Holland.
Don't feed the wargs, folks.
No, please don't. They're very dangerous. Yes. As always, folks, we want to thank everybody who's listening, but we also want to give a very special thank you to our patrons at the Kierdance contribution tier. DeMay in Alaska, James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Emily in Texas, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Jerry in Texas, Bruce in California, and Mario in Utah. Thank you all so very much.
And folks, make sure you don't miss a single episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Subscribe to the show through iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, and most of all, your vote for or against traveling through Moria to Barliman at theprancingponypodcast.com.
Oh man, I'm with Aragorn. No Moria.
Yeah, I'd rather just gap a Rohan for me.
Yeah. Well, folks, Barliman is not always, and by that I mean Barliman is never punctual with the mail.
That's true.
But we'll get back to you as soon as we can, and your question or comment may be featured on an upcoming show.
That's right. Well, this has been far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.